Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Excuse the sound in the background, guys. That is my furnace. I can't do anything about it. That thing is just noisy as heck. I try to drown it out, but I can't. So let's get into this video. So today we're going to be talking about the CP changes coming with Season of the Dragon, and it is going to start with the first DLC, Wrathstone. So if you guys don't know, they are stopping the increase of our CP at 810. That means we are not getting any more CP to allocate to our characters beyond 810. It didn't say that they were stopping CP altogether, just that they were stopping the increase to what we can put towards our CP. And I'll let the video explain it. So I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to let you guys watch the video, and then we'll go back into and discuss the rest of it. And it starts at 1 hour, 56 minutes. If you guys check in the description below, I'll have a link to this so you can watch it.
Our big thing is the champion point increase that we have traditionally done every update. It's not happening this update. Not going to do it.
We're not going to increase it anymore. No, that's something that we've heard loud and clear from players.
When is the next time you're going to increase it, Rich?
Tell us more, Rich.
Go ahead.
Wow. For the foreseeable future, we don't plan on increasing it.
Yeah, you heard it here, chat. For the foreseeable future.
Chad is like, what?
No more
Yeah,
CP.
it's something that we've heard a lot. You know, we kind of agree with, the power that the champion system is giving to players. And we want to take a step back and reevaluate the system and look at it and see if it's doing the things that we actually want it to do. So once we figure out what we want to do with it and how we want to address things, then we'll kind of talk more about it. But for now, we're not going to increase the cap.
Wow.
It's a good thing.
Heard it here first.
Good thing's
Yeah.
coming.
That I did not. I've anticipated a lot of things, but not that one.
And this will also help newer players
Yeah.
It will.
to get caught up a bit.
Catch up a little, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
So that's what the devs, or Rich Lambert, had to say about it, is they want to evaluate how it fits or is working in the game, and if it's working basically to their design philosophy. If you guys don't know, this game has a design philosophy. Anyone who plays this game has heard the design philosophy. Play how you want. Even though we know there's a meta, and even though I've pointed this out and I've told people that yes, there's a meta, but it doesn't mean it's the only way, that it is one meta out of millions that they basically have put into the game, but nobody really looks at that stuff, because a lot of times people will take the path of least resistance, or the path that's easiest to win. And that's the easiest way to win, is just follow the meta. So a lot of people do. But a lot of people don't as well, because a lot of people are Elder Scrolls fans. Elder Scrolls fans will play this game how they want, regardless of what the meta is. And that's because they know the game allows it. It allows for that kind of design structure. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about CP, and why this is a good thing. First off, just imagine if they continued to allow us to get CP, but realize later down the road that it wasn't working as well as they thought, or it was working too good or whatever, and they nerfed it like they did with Morrowind. How many people would be upset? A lot of people. A lot more people would be upset with them if they did that than if they said, hey, we're going to cap it at 810, let players catch up, this gives us time to evaluate and look at, and come up with an idea that will be respectful to the player base. Not just the in-game crowd who already are sitting at 1,000 or 800 or sitting at cap for the next DLC or the next chapter. I mean, I'm already sitting at the next DLC and chapter. And almost the DLC afterwards. So I'm pretty much set for almost the whole year. And I will be, by the time the year ends, I will be above that point, because I'll have earned a lot more CP levels. And that's what the devs are looking at. They're looking at the power growth our characters are having, because our characters are becoming too overpowered. How many of you here have played World of Warcraft, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars The Old Republic, any of the older classic MMOs with power progression built into them. In those games, the biggest complaint that most people have with them is 90% of the content becomes obsolete. It becomes useless. Even the dungeons and the raids become useless in time because our characters become too overpowered for them, and it leaves us very limited places to play. The developers didn't create a game the size of World of Warcraft to limit it to one place to play. And this is where a lot of people misunderstand Elder Scrolls design. The reason they did one Tamriel was to make one Tamriel or the game feel like an Elder Scrolls game where you could go anywhere at any time and just play and have fun and enjoy your friends' company. And you could join your friends, even if they were higher level than you. They realized that what they did with Orsinium was probably the best decision they made. So they built the rest of the game to mimic that, to follow in that structure. So you can go and play any content at any given time, regardless of level. But because of the power creep that was introduced with CP, and it wasn't just power creep, we are talking a serious power level increase, it made 90% of the content easy. Not so easy it was unplayable, but so easy it became mind-numbing to a lot of the community. And a lot of the community like that, a lot of the community don't like that. So this is where the flaws of the CP system really weigh in the game, is it made 90% of the content obsolete or useless. If you take a look at the dungeon system, and you look at not only the veteran, but normal mode, and you look at how the dungeons progress, in the dungeon finder, not the game itself, because in the game itself, as long as you can go to a dungeon, you can play a dungeon. It doesn't matter what level you are. It's only in the dungeon finder that it matters. But take, for example, all the base game dungeons. Fungal Grotto 1, Spindle Clutch 1, Banished Cells 1, Dark Shade Caverns 1, Elden Hollow 1, Wayrest 1, Ark's Cranium, City of Ash 1, Crypt of Hearts 1, Dire Frost, Tempest Island, Volenfell, Blackheart Haven, Blessed Crucible, all the way up to Vaults of Madness. Any of them with a Path 1 were base game dungeons. How many of the base game dungeons are challenging to in-game players today? None. These things are child's play. Do you know why? Because they were built in a time when we didn't have CP or veteran ranks. Now you take in the Path 2 dungeons, those were where CP ranks or veteran ranks were introduced. And those dungeons are more challenging, more difficult, because they were built with the veteran system in mind. Now let's jump to DLC dungeons, starting with White Gold Tower and Imperial City Prison. Are those challenging group dungeons? In normal mode, they're challenging a little bit for new players, but they're not impossible. You just have to learn the mechanics. Once you get the mechanics down, they become pretty easy in normal. What about in veteran? They're a little bit more harder, a little bit more difficult, because you have to learn some new mechanics with some of the stuff, but it's still the same, and it's just as easy. And that's because the difficulty of it was introduced before they did the CP system. They were still doing veteran ranks. What about Cradle of Shadows, Ruins Mazatoon, the Shadows of the Hiss DLC? Another one where it was introduced with veteran ranks and CP, but at the same time, guys, the CP system was nowhere near what it is today. And you got to remember, one Tamriel came out 4 months, I think it was, 6 months after Shadows of the Hiss. And one Tamriel changed the foundations of the game because it set the world to a certain power level. It set dungeons to a certain power level. So now, this has been adjusted to a certain power level, but not to the power level of CP 160 still. It still can be done below CP 160. But it's set to CP 160 in this. Actually, I think it's set to a little bit higher. But then let's go into the next dungeon DLC, which was Horns of the Reach, which added Bloodroot Forge and Falkreath Hold. Now this is after Morrowind came out, and we had the new change to CP. Falkreath, or the Horns of the Reach DLC, was a challenging DLC, even in normal mode and veteran mode for base game players. And that's because they added new mechanics to encounters that we had never experienced before. They didn't, the power level was already set to a certain CP, but at the same time it was set to a certain CP with growth of character. So it was set to CP 160, like that's when you can enter it, but it's actually set to CP 300. So this is actually a lot more challenging for somebody that's CP 160 than it is somebody 300 or above. Now you gotta remember, when Morrowind came out, CP 300 is where they introduced the stat cap of our characters from CP growth. So we have levels 1 to 50 that increase our stats by 50 points. Is it 50 points? 64 points, sorry. 64 attribute points. Then you get your skills. And then you get your CP. But it still fits into that idea of, hey, this is how we want it to work. And we want to keep players at within a certain power range. This way they don't exceed the power level of the world itself too much, where the world still has some challenge to it, but also the dungeons feel like they're more challenging because we're introducing new mechanics. Then you look at Scalecaller Peak and oh my gosh, Fang Lair, the Dragon Bones DLC dungeons. These dungeons, a heck of a lot more challenging because they introduced even more new mechanics that we weren't used to, and we had to learn those mechanics. And then once we learn those mechanics, the content's actually pretty easy now for a lot of us in normal mode. In veteran mode, it's a different story because in veteran you have to deal with different mechanics in some fights, and then also on top of that, the things are just more powerful. They're set to CP 300. They could even be set to 350, 400, we don't know. But it's set to a certain power level. Then you look at the latest DLC, March of Sacrifice and Moonhunter Keep. It's set to the same difficulty as Fang Lair. But if you have max CP and you have a well-organized group and you have a well-set-up stuff, it's easy. But they didn't do this with just dungeons. They did it with trials as well. If you take any of the base game trials, those were introduced with veteran ranks in mind. This is before CP was even introduced. They were just built for veteran ranks. CP 160, basically. So the base trials in the game, Sanctum Ophidium, Ethereum Archive, and Hellrust Citadel, are basically built for CP 160, even in veteran mode. Then you take into account Maw of Lorkhaj. This was introduced when CP and veteran ranks were together, but it was set to a certain power level, a little bit higher than that of the base trials. It's a more challenging trial because of new mechanics, new dynamics, but it's set to a certain power level. When you look at Halls of Fabrication is set to 300. What about Asylum Sanctorum? CP 300. But it has different mechanics, different dynamics to it. What about CR? Cloud Rest in Somerset. Same thing, set to CP 300, but it's the mechanics, it's the dynamics of the fight, of the encounters that are different. Once you learn those, they become pretty easy. eventually people will start lowering, like tanks will start lowering their health, adjusting for other things, because the contents become so easy for them. They realize they don't need that much. They can actually adjust for other things. And this is where a lot of people misunderstand the game's design philosophy. So let's talk about CP real quick, a little bit more in depth. If you look at the CP tree, and if you don't know how it works, I'm going to go over it real quick. So the red tree is all about mitigation, survivability, max health, that kind of stuff. The green tree is all about resource management, and resource management in a different sense when it comes to more of the stamina-based active passive type thing, where it comes to things like blocking, dodging, sprinting, bashing, things like that. It's based on that, and then resource management through recovery. So it's solely based on that, but it also gives you max stamina. Then you go into the blue tree, and the blue tree is mostly based on damage. There is one that's based on healing and one that's based on shield strength of an enemy, like doing damage to a person who has shields, like blocking and it has a shield up or whatever, doing damage to them. So, or not blocking, but having a shield up. So it's like you have all these different tools that are available to you to use, but people have found a way to make them work best with a certain group dynamic. So if you look at the different trees and how they work, like, oh, and blue tree does magicka, by the way. So this gives you 20% more magicka with 100 points. This gives you 20% stamina with 100 points, and this gives you 20% more health with 100 points. So technically, our attributes are capped at 300 CP. Now, when you look at the stars individually, you'll see that I have like so many points placed into certain ones, and we don't place points in the upper ones, just the lower ones. And those give us benefits like advantage benefits, like by percentages or numerical value. These ones up here are just flat, give us no matter what the same benefit, depending on where we have points and other things. Like if you look at spell absorption, it just restores 3,465 magicka, and that's at a 30% equal to 30% of your max health, like if you take damage. So it's like, okay, and then this one gives you so much resistances. But the point here is that these points that you put into these things give you a growth in power. Not just in stats, but in your character's ability for survival, mitigation, like survival through mitigation and max health. Here. Through resource management and max stamina. Through damage and max magicka. So that's how the CP system works. But you got to remember, our characters, the game was built with a specific design thing when they did one Tamriel. That our characters would be sitting at a certain power level for the content. For the base content, which is the overworld. Then you have things like dungeons, where it's at another difficulty and power level. Then you have trials, which is another difficulty and power level. But they follow the same structure. They're built on the same idea, the same design philosophy that one Tamriel introduced. The idea of play how you want is still there, and that's the true design philosophy behind the game, is to play how you want and enjoy the game how you want. It's just that players created, with the tools given to them, the best, most effective tactic available, which is a meta, and they found that to be the best way to play the game. But the devs aren't catering to that. Have you noticed? They never cater to the meta itself. They cater sometimes with like a gear set here and there, but they will adjust the game so that the whole spectrum of the game works, like in the design of play how you want. You guys ever wonder why they try to balance every class to play every role and be effective at every role? Because they want you to be able to play how you want. But here's the thing. Can you take a Templar tank, a Sork tank, any combination of DPS, class-wise, and 2 healers and complete an in-game trial? Like, let's say a Nightblade healer and DK healer. All built to meta standards. Okay? let's say you have 2 Nightblade stamina DPS, 2 Magicka DPS Nightblade, or 2 stamina Nightblade DPS, 2 Sork, or a Sork and a DK DPS, Stam DPS, a DK, a Sork, Templar, and a Warden DPS, Magicka. Can you still take that group into a trial and complete it? Yes. And if they're all built to meta standards, are they effective as the meta that's used in most of the in-game? No, because it's a different group dynamic. But that dynamic that you create with that group is its own meta. Because there's no other way to make that group any better. And that's why I said this in one of my recent videos, that a most effective tactic available this game wasn't designed to have a singular meta. It was designed to allow a lot of different group dynamics to play through the game and be effective. The meta just created this idea in the community that it is the only way and that it is the best way because math shows otherwise. When in fact, this game wasn't designed that way. The CP system wasn't designed that way. It was very simple. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The CP system's child's play when it comes to character development. But it's an extension of what our characters already have. All the stuff our characters already have, this is an extension of. Because our character is broken down really simple. Look at this. We have max health, Magicka, stamina. Those are our primary stats. They don't get any bigger. I mean, they can get bigger, but they're going to be the same across the board for most races. Unless your race has a benefit towards a certain stat. What about recovery? Same thing. What about damage? Same thing. It all plays together. And this is where a lot of people misinterpret the game's design philosophy. Like when I say that this game was designed not to have a singular meta, I wasn't lying. It wasn't designed that way. The community created the singular meta idea. Yes, the devs gave us the tools to create it, but the devs didn't create it. They didn't say, this is the meta, this is how you have to play. The community did that. Not the devs. The devs created a game and have stuck behind the design philosophy of, hey, we want you to play how you want. We want you to enjoy our game. But they also have to make the game to where it can be completed by a mass majority of people, not just the hardcore. This is why the hardcore finds everything so easy, is because it wasn't designed specifically for them. The content was designed for everyone. And when you take an idea of a game and start trying to create your own idea out of it, and you force everyone into that idea, you actually create more problems than you do fix. So like I said, I have nothing against the idea of a meta. That's fine. People can play it. I don't care. What I have a problem with is when people tell me that's how I have to play. When I can see clearly that the design philosophy behind the game isn't that way. Because if we were restricted to the dynamics of the meta, the whole game would be built that way. Everything in the game would be built that way. Even ever since they introduced the class rep system, have you seen they have not changed the design philosophy? But yet the people who are involved in the class rep program are like, we're not getting anything done because they're not listening to us. Oh, they're listening. They're just listening to your side of the story, and you're not paying attention to their design philosophy. And that's where a lot of the argument comes from in that area. Now that the devs have more open conversation with them, with an NDA in place, will that improve? I don't know. And I don't know if the community, the people who are part of the class reps really understand what the devs are trying to do with their game, because the devs couldn't really talk to them about it. But now that they can, maybe they'll understand and be like, wow, okay, but in order to do that, you needed all this stuff to work in this category or in these ways. And if the devs go, well, we've play tested this with, play testers and they've done this stuff, then it can be done. This is how we want it, kind of thing. I mean, I don't know what's going on with class rep stuff. I'm not involved. But that's how I see it as a player. And I get why people are frustrated about the CP system. You're losing your power growth. But at the same time, would you much rather have power growth and then all of a sudden get nerfed? Or would you much rather have them put it on hold, nerf it now by putting it on hold, finding what's the best system that could work later on, and then implement that idea so you're not going, oh man, I just lost all this other stuff. It's up to you guys to decide on that. I feel like this is the best decision. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is like new player versus old player. Veterans versus new players. New players joining the game with Elsewhere or Morrowind or Murkmire, whatever DLC they come in. You got to remember, these guys got to start from scratch and work their way up to our playing skill. Are we going to make them play for 4 years before they get there? No, the devs aren't either. They're going to allow them to join in right away, and they're going to allow them to grow in power just as quickly as we can. But when you have a system like the CP system in place, the gap gets wider and wider and wider every update, eventually leaving the new players so far behind that they can't catch up. And this is what happened with games like, if you go to play World of Warcraft now, trying to catch up to the in-game players takes weeks. Can even take months. And that's not what the devs want here. They want people to be able to jump in the game and start playing from day one and enjoying the game. And that's what they're doing. Every update, they add new features to make it easier for new players to get in and play and get caught up. They adjust the CP value, how much experience it takes to get CP. They incorporated this rest XP thing, the enlightenment. I call it rest XP because that's basically what it is. You log out, you gain enlightenment while you're logged out. When you come back, you get this enlightenment. You can earn extra XP. Really cool idea. And it benefits the new players, but it also benefits us veteran players by allowing us to gain more CP past the point. But now, with it being capped at 810, new players can still continue to gain CP up to that point, get caught up, while the devs are working on a new idea. This way, the floor and ceiling gets less and less apart. So I think that this idea of CP being put on hold, great idea. Not because it's going to affect me in any way, because it won't. It will just give me time to hone my ability to play the game and become a better player. Because now I have time to focus on learning mechanics. I'm not focusing on worrying about what's going to happen in the next update. I can just focus on playing the game. I know a lot of people don't understand that, but that's the truth. For me, that's the truth. I get to focus on the game. I'm not so concerned about the next update coming along and how it's going to affect my CP. Am I worried about updates and other changes they might make to the game? Yeah, but not so. It's not as detrimental as what CP does. Like, changing skills and how they work or adding new gear sets doesn't change how I play the game. It changes the functions of things in the game, but sometimes it's for the better. And sometimes it fits within the design philosophy I see the devs have for the game. So yeah, everyone's going to view this change as bad, but a lot of people will probably view it as bad, but I view it as good. I think this is a perfect time for them to introduce this and to make it part of the game. But that's pretty much it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you know what's coming. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.